Welcome back to the IBSP. Here's your host, Boxing News.
Terence Crawford has a real chance to beat Canelo Alvarez. And look, let's break it down honestly and objectively as possible. And as you all know, Turkey Al-Sheikh is busy trying to make the Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford fight for September in Las Vegas. That's something that's likely to happen. You've heard it from all of these boxing sources and sites. So they're moving towards making that fight happen. And have no doubt, in a matchup between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, my prediction is Canelo Alvarez. I believe that the weight's going to make a difference. Canelo's power is going to make a difference. Canelo's chin's going to make a difference. And the fact that Canelo Alvarez is also a very skilled fighter, just like Terence Crawford. That's why I favor Canelo Alvarez to beat Terence Crawford. But when I break down and analyze the fight, Terence Crawford actually has a very real chance to go in and beat Canelo. Now, I favor Canelo to win the fight. I pick Canelo to win the fight, but I give Terence Crawford a chance. And this is why. Terence Crawford is not a good fighter. Terence Crawford is a great fighter. Terence Bud Crawford can switch hit. He can fight out of either stance. This man has elite footwork. He makes adjustments on the fly. And he has a speed advantage and a reach advantage in this fight. So Terence Bud Crawford is going to be awfully dangerous to Canelo Alvarez with all of those things. I mean, look, let's just be honest and unbiased about it. Terence Crawford being a great fighter, being able to do a multitude of things, is going to be a very difficult task for anybody to deal with. Even a guy like Canelo, who's going to come into the fight a little bit slower and who's not going to be able to make as many adjustments as quickly as Terence Crawford will. You see the Canelo Alvarez that fought Billy Joe Saunders, that fought Caleb Plant. That Canelo Alvarez no longer exists. You remember, Canelo Alvarez was more explosive in those fights, fighting the guys who were moving a little bit quicker than him. Canelo Alvarez was more explosive in those fights. Canelo Alvarez is no longer as explosive as he was when he fought those guys years ago. This is not that same Canelo Alvarez. This Canelo Alvarez is going to have a slightly harder time getting to Bud Crawford and slowing him down. That doesn't mean I'm picking Crawford. That simply means that Terence Crawford's going to have a decided advantage, because the Canelo Alvarez that fought the Plant and Saunders will not be the Canelo Alvarez that fights Terence Crawford. Now, you've seen pundits all over the boxing world for years have said Canelo Alvarez is on a decline. Canelo Alvarez is on a decline. We've seen Canelo Alvarez not being the same guy who once had that same explosiveness. I mean, let's just be honest about it. The Canelo that fought the Saunders, that fought the Plant, the skillful fighters, the faster fighters, the fighters with the longer reach, Canelo Alvarez stopped both of those guys. Ever since he beat those guys, went on and had other injuries, and years of miles have caught up with Canelo Alvarez. You know, you see the guy doesn't have the same explosiveness. Canelo Alvarez is still an elite fighter, still an excellent fighter, but I would say that Canelo Alvarez is at the back end of his prime and no longer at the center of it, which means Canelo Alvarez is just not as good as he was and not at his very best, although he's still a very good fighter. Now, when you look at a guy like Canelo and you compare him to Bud Crawford, Canelo Alvarez is actually the older fighter. Now, many people say, well, no, Terence Crawford is actually older than Canelo. He is with age, but we're not talking about age. We're talking about ring age. Ring age is very different from natural age. You got to understand, Terence Crawford doesn't have the wars that Canelo Alvarez has. Canelo Alvarez still has scars and wars from the Triple G fights. Canelo Alvarez has fought elite competition year in and year out. Canelo Alvarez has built up a lot of wars, taken a lot of damage, had a lot of injuries and a lot of punishment for a lot of years. Canelo Alvarez has put in a lot of work. That's why he's a Hall of Famer. That's why he's a legend. But in ring, Canelo Alvarez's body is older than Terence Crawford's body. Terence Crawford has never really even been through a war. He fought Errol Spence. Errol Spence took an ass whooping, not Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford took no miles off of an Errol Spence fight. The hardest fight in Terence Crawford fight was his last fight against Israel Madrimov. And even that fight, you know, Terence Crawford didn't sustain any real damage. This man wasn't on the canvas. This man wasn't hurt to the body. So even with that, Terence Crawford has not faced a lot of opponents that significantly hurt him, that significantly wore him down, and that significantly challenged him. So when you look at it, Terence Crawford is going to be physically in the ring a younger man because he does not have the same mileage that Canelo Alvarez has. And the fact that Terence Crawford's a great fighter who's able to switch hit, who has elite footwork, who's able to make adjustments on the fly, who's going to have a speed and reach advantage, he's a real threat to Canelo Alvarez in this fight. Although I'm picking Canelo to get the victory, I don't want to discount Bud because he is a great fighter, and this will be no easy fight.